Unfortunately, accidents happen. Some small and fairly manageable, and others big and hazardous that require expert assistance. This presentation will help you know how to implement and execute an emergency response plan. You need to be able to identify how unintended pesticide releases, like fire and spills, can harm humans and the environment. In dealing with emergencies, you must know how to clean up and dispose of contaminated items to reduce environmental impact. And you should be familiar with emergency response equipment. Be prepared. The more prepared you are to handle an emergency, the faster you can react and reduce impacts on human and animal health, and reduce impacts to the environment. What is a typical emergency when working with pesticides? If a vehicle or spray rig overturned, pesticide injuries, fires, or spills can occur. A ruptured hose can cause a pesticide spill that results in an exposure incident or environmental contamination. An explosion or fire in a pesticide storage area can result in toxic fumes. Why is it important to plan for an emergency response? Being well prepared to respond to an emergency can prevent harm to humans and the environment. How you respond makes all the difference. Designate an emergency coordinator for the emergency response plan. Your plan should include a list of agencies to be notified, including the contact person. Have phone numbers for the local emergency planning committee, police and fire units, and the local paramedics and hospitals. List the chemical manufacturer's contact information for the pesticides used. Include agencies that are responsible for pesticide containment and hazardous waste cleanup. Don't forget to protect yourself and your assets. Contact an attorney if there is an emergency involving pesticides. Emergency response forms should be available. Report the information about the incident on these forms and keep them with the phone number list. A map of the pesticide storage facility and bulk storage tanks is essential to assist emergency responders and employees. Include the layout of the storage area, access roads and fences, main shutoffs for utilities, and the location of fire alarms, extinguishers, and personal protective equipment. Make sure emergency response agencies have a current copy available in the event an accident occurs. Provide the emergency response agencies with an area map that directs them to the pesticide storage facility without delay. Keep a pesticide storage inventory of the pesticide products with the trade names, volumes, and locations. Also keep copies of labels and MSDSs and your personal protective equipment available, but don't house them in your storage area. Keep emergency equipment handy anytime you're working with pesticides, like tools for building dikes and digging trenches, containment and cleanup supplies, as well as a fire extinguisher and PPE. Your emergency plans need to be specific and include step-by-step instructions for each type of emergency that can occur. Prior to any incident, appoint the person responsible to handle the emergency. When an emergency does occur, the responsible person needs to write down everything that happens and then share the information with the local emergency responders. It's important to understand that pesticide fires can occur, but there are considerations that can help avoid pesticide fires. When pesticide products are purchased, find out about their flammability and storage hazards prior to storage. Products that are flammable have label statements that read, Do not use or store near heat or open flame. Products that contain oils or petroleum solvents generally have flammability hazards. If a pesticide fire occurs, there are obvious potential hazards. Highly toxic fumes may be given off during a pesticide fire. These vapors or smoke can harm firefighters, people, animals, or plants. After the fire, there may be pesticide residues in the debris and soil. The water used to quench the fire can result in toxic runoff away from the site. For this reason, don't spray large volumes of water on a pesticide fire. Let it burn. How can the hazards from a pesticide fire be reduced? The storage facility should be placed away from people and animals. Keep the storage facility locked and posted with warning signs. Warning signs alert first responders about what's inside. First responders must know what they're being exposed to in order to protect themselves and others. Store combustible materials away from heat sources. Don't let sunlight beat down on glass containers. Make sure fire alarms are installed, maintained, and working properly. Use foam-type fire extinguishers for chemical fires. Take precautions to reduce fire hazards. Provide the fire department with the location and facility maps and the pesticide inventory. Develop an emergency plan, designate a coordinator, and train employees on how to handle an emergency. Keep an inventory of the pesticide products in the storage area. If there's a chemical fire, evacuate the area. Call 911 and report what chemicals are in the fire. Establish a perimeter and keep people out of the area. Have the MSDSs available for all of the chemicals in the storage area. There are emergency procedures that can be implemented for small fires. Contain the fire with fog, foam, or dry powder. If there's only water available, use a fine spray or fog, not a strong stream that can break bags and glass, spreading contamination. If water is used, contain the water in spilled chemicals. Don't allow runoff. If it's a large fire, consider letting the fire burn, since using water can spread contamination. If necessary, build dikes to contain water. After a pesticide fire, clean or dispose of all clothing. Anyone involved in the fire should shower thoroughly. Leave the fire site for cleanup until after it's cooled. Okay, now let's talk about spills. When handling spills, make sure you're appropriately protected with PPE before you enter a zone of exposure. If anyone's injured, administer first aid immediately. Then, remember the 3 C's for spills: control, contain, and clean up the spill. Some pesticide spills may be small and others quite large. Applicators must know how to respond to a pesticide spill. The 3 C's are a good reminder. Control the spill. Stop the leak. For example, if a container is turned over, right the container so that it no longer spills. If you have a container that's leaking, put it into a larger container. If that's not possible, try to plug the leak. Make certain to wear personal protective equipment when managing a pesticide spill. While a spill is being controlled, call the police if the spill is on the highway. If the spill can impact water, call the appropriate state agency. Make sure you contact a state agency to report a spill so they can either answer questions of the public or assist with the spill if needed. Labels and MSDSs provide critical information to emergency responders. If it's a large spill, send for help. Don't leave the site unattended. Prevent people from entering the contaminated area. When a large spill occurs, or a small spill that poses risks to humans or the environment, or even if the spill is low risk but visible to the public, call the County Emergency Management Office. For emergency response information and technical assistance, call Chemtrec 1-800-424-9300. Pesticide labels also list an emergency number that can be called. Prevent pesticide exposures by roping off the contaminated area and keeping people out. Create a 30-foot perimeter around the area. Avoid contact with pesticide drift or fumes from the spilled pesticide. If the material is flammable, don't use flares. Consider downwind areas and evacuate people from those areas since they could be exposed. Once the spill is controlled, contain the spill. Build a dam or dike around the spill with materials from the spill kit to prevent the spread of pesticide out of the spill area. For large spills, this can be quite the undertaking. The top photo shows containment in a river just downstream of a spill to prevent any further downstream contamination. Spilled pesticide should never enter water, including sewers and drains. If the spilled pesticide enters water, immediately contact the appropriate agency. Notify the local emergency planning coordinator. Immediate action is required since it may be necessary to notify downstream users. For spills on non-porous surface, like a containment pad or storage room floor, spread absorbent materials over the spilled pesticide. Absorbent flakes, fine sand, vermiculite, clay, and pet litter absorb pesticides well. Don't use sawdust if the pesticide is a strong oxidizer. Absorbent pillows, tubes, or pads are convenient to use, but must be disposed of properly. If at all possible, use an absorbent that can be diluted and applied to a label site to prevent disposal problems. Thinking ahead and having a well-supplied pesticide spill kit can save you a lot of headaches when an accident occurs. Spilled dust, wettable powder, and granular formulations can be lightly misted to contain it, or you can cover it with plastic. Finally, the spill must be cleaned up. Give the absorbent material time to soak up the spill, then sweep it up and place it in a container for later use or disposal. Once the material is collected, decontaminate the area. Mix up a solution of 30% bleach or hydrated lime and work it into the contaminated area with a coarse broom. Then again, put absorbent material over the area where the bleach and lime has been applied. Sweep it up and put it into a lined drum for disposal later on. Always wear personal protective equipment when cleaning up pesticide spills. When decontaminating the spill area, do not use bleach and lime together. It may be necessary to repeat the application of the bleach or lime to thoroughly decontaminate the area. If soil is contaminated during a spill, remove the top 2 to 3 inches of soil. It can be mixed with clean soil and applied at or below a labeled rate to a labeled site. If contaminated soil can't be legally applied, dispose of it properly. To recondition the soil, layer 2 inches of lime over the area. Then add fresh topsoil over the lime. Activated charcoal can also be effectively used to decontaminate an area where a minor spill has occurred. Contaminated equipment is another concern. It can be cleaned with a 30% bleach or an alkaline detergent. Wear personal protective equipment during the decontamination process. Never mix bleach and detergent. After the pesticide spill's been cleaned up, discard brooms and any clothing or materials that may have been contaminated. Disposable personal protective equipment or any PPE that's been highly contaminated should be disposed of as household hazardous waste. Wash, wash, wash thoroughly with soap and water to remove possible pesticide contamination that may have occurred during the cleanup process. When a spill occurs, record all the cleanup procedures that were used. This is for your legal protection. Keep records of all activities that were conducted during the emergency, including conversations with regulatory authorities, emergency personnel, and the public. Good documentation is critical. Your records show clearly how emergency response progressed and how you acted in the best way possible to protect people and the environment. Photographs are a good way to capture information about the spill and the cleanup procedure. Spill prevention is the key to dealing with spills. Conduct regular inspections of vehicles and equipment to make certain that they're fully operational and not leaking. A thorough understanding of the spray system can help avoid spills. Drive safely when transporting pesticides. Always keep a spill kit accessible when using pesticides. Have a spill kit near the pesticide storage area and in vehicles that transport pesticides. A spill kit should contain emergency phone numbers and personal protective equipment in addition to absorbent materials such as pet litter, tubes, or pillows. It should also have a shovel, broom, and dustpan, and a fire extinguisher that's rated for many types of fires. A large plastic drum should be available to contain the spilled materials prior to use or disposal. In summary, it's important to develop an emergency response plan and thoroughly train all employees on how to respond to an emergency. Remember that some products are highly flammable. When a pesticide spill occurs, follow the 3 C's response plan: control, contain, and clean up the spill. Preventing an emergency is the best solution. Always keep a spill kit handy when working with pesticides. Question 1. When responding to an emergency, the notification call should include what information? 1. Name and callback number of the person reporting the incident. 2. Precise location of the incident. 3. The exact name, quantity, and classification. 4. The extent of any injuries. Answer A. 1 only. B. 1 and 2 only. C. 1, 2, and 3 only. D. 1, 2, 3, and 4? Answer D. All of the listed information should be reported. Question 2. Concerns from pesticide fires include all of the following except one option. Which option is not a concern with fires? A. Highly toxic vapors downwind of the fire. B. Contaminated runoff from the fire site. C. Back siphoning into a water supply. D. Pesticide residues in the debris or soil after a fire. Answer C. Back siphoning is a concern when filling a spray tank without using an air gap or check valve. Vapors, contaminated runoff, and soil residues are concerns during and after a fire. Question 3. Which of the following should be the first action in response to a pesticide spill? A. Dispose of contaminated absorbent material. B. Spread absorbent material over the spill. C. Decontaminate the area where the spill occurred. D. Stop the leak or spill. Answer D. Control the spill first, then contain it, and then clean it up. This presentation was authored by Carrie Foss, Carol Ramsey, Becky Hines, and Brett Johnson, Washington State University's Urban IPM and Pesticide Safety Education Program. The illustrations in this presentation were provided by the University of Missouri-Lincoln, Virginia Tech, the Washington State Department of Agriculture, and Washington State University. Presentations were reviewed by Beth Long, University of Tennessee, Ed Crow, Maryland Department of Agriculture, Jeannie Kasai, the U.S. EPA, and Susan Whitney King, University of Delaware. Narration was provided by Carol Ramsey, Washington State University, Urban IPM, and Pesticide Safety Education.